we face a crisis unlike any other. To overcome it, we must unite. Tonight, through the universal language of music, we salute the bravery and sacrifice of health heroes and others. As we do so, let's remember the most vulnerable. And please join our call for a global ceasefire to focus on our common enemy, the virus. Thank you for your support for the life-saving work of the World Health Organization and the other humanitarian agencies. Together, we will defeat this virus and rebuild a fairer world as united global citizens and United Nations. On this International Mother Earth Day, all eyes are on the COVID-19 pandemic, the biggest test the world has faced since the Second World War. We must work together to save lives, ease suffering, and lessening the shattering economic and social consequences. The impact of the coronavirus is both immediate and dreadful. But there is another deep emergency, the planet's unfolding environmental crisis. Biodiversity is in steep decline, and climate disruption is approaching a point of no return. We must act decisively to protect our planet from both the coronavirus and the existential threat of climate disruption. The current crisis is an unprecedented wake-up call. We need to turn the recovery into a real opportunity to do things right for the future.
Este es un gobierno que escucha y les anuncio hoy que este próximo fin de semana emitiré una orden para que los niños menores de 14 años puedan dar paseos. Daremos a conocer los detalles concretos y las recomendaciones de cómo tienen que producirse estos paseos. Lo estamos trabajando con diferentes miembros del Gobierno, en concreto con la Vicepresidencia Segunda de Asuntos Sociales. E insisto, este fin de semana he tomado la decisión de emitir una orden que permitirá desde el mismo domingo, día 26 de abril, el primer día, si se aprueba mañana en el Congreso el decreto de estado de alarma en que estará vigente este nuevo decreto, tomaré esta orden para que los niños menores de 14 años puedan dar paseos en las condiciones concretas que daremos a conocer próximamente.
Let me just comment. We've had tremendous support for the PPP. This gives us another $310 billion for the PPP. We look forward to the House passing this tomorrow and being up and running quickly after that. This also gives us $50 billion for disaster loans, EIDL loans, that will allow the SBA to make $300 billion of disaster loans, all for small businesses. Also allows us, as the President said, more money to hospitals and an unprecedented amount of money for testing. And again, I think we understand hospitals, not only the hospitals that have been impacted by coronavirus, but more importantly, many hospitals that have been shut down, and making sure that the doctors and nurses get.
As we all know, millions of Americans sacrificed their jobs in order to battle the virus and save the lives of our fellow citizens. We have a solemn duty to ensure these unemployed Americans regain their jobs and their livelihoods. Therefore, in order to protect American workers, I will be issuing a temporary suspension of immigration into the United States. You heard about that last night. By pausing immigration, we'll help put unemployed Americans first in line for jobs as America reopens. So important. It would be wrong and unjust for Americans laid off by the virus to be replaced with new immigrant labor flown in from abroad. We must first take care of the American worker, take care of the American worker.
Oh, not another commercial.
The kid used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was trained, and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
These officials have been claiming the epidemic is under control in China, but many cities are going back under lockdown, suggesting a second wave of outbreaks. Why does the world know so little about the virus until it's too late? An internal document issued by the Chinese regime, known as Document Number 3, seems to explain. After China and Russia closed its border, Chinese citizens stranded in between. In order to prevent them from coming in, rewards offered to report anyone who enters the country. An anonymous tip alerting police to discover a nursing home in New Jersey overwhelmed with dead bodies. UK's foreign ministry says the Chinese regime will have some hard questions to answer. This as Beijing comes under growing scrutiny over its handling of the virus outbreak.
I'm very proud to be WHO because WHO was affected, but WHO has always remained on the field.
Nous avons perdu des collègues qui ont été assassinés, d'autres ont perdu leurs enfants, leurs êtres chers, leurs papas, leurs mamans, pendant qu'ils étaient ici en train d'aider à sauver les vies des autres. Je pense que pour nous, si on abandonnait le job, on n'aurait jamais rendu hommage à ces collègues qui sont tombés. Je pense que c'est une fierté pour moi d'avoir contribué à honorer la mémoire de mes collègues qui sont restés sur le champ de cette bataille.
We didn't work only in Ebola, because when we train people, when we make a construction of an isolation room in the community, it is not only for Ebola. We contribute to have a better health system in this community.
Jeanne a 96 ans. Depuis le début du confinement, elle ne mange presque plus, malgré toute la bienveillance des soignants.
Je peux même pas aller chez ma voisine. On peut même pas discuter. Je suis toute la journée renfermée là-dedans. C'est pas une vie à 97 ans.
C'est vrai que c'est à cause du virus.
Oui, mais je comprends bien. Mais ma voisine n'a pas le virus et puis moi non plus. On pourrait se voir de temps en temps, discuter un petit peu.
Vous mangez plus?
Ben, je force parce que mes enfants ils rouspètent. Je me force.
À manger?
Mais oui. Parce qu'ils me disent, maman, tiens le coup jusqu'au bout.
We're filling up our national petroleum reserves, strategic, the strategic reserves. And we're looking to put as much as 75 million barrels into the reserves themselves. Based on the record low price of oil that you've been seeing, it's at a level that's very interesting to a lot of people. We're filling up our national petroleum reserves, strategic, the strategic reserves. And we're looking to put as much as 75 million barrels into the reserves themselves. That would top it out. That would be first time in a long time it's been topped out. We'd get it for the right price.
Does that make you want to see Saudi Arabia and Russia and OPEC Plus do more to reduce supply?
Much of it has to do with short sellers. Much of it has to do, if you look a month into the future, I think it's at $25 or $28 a barrel. So a lot of people got caught. They got caught, and there are a lot of people that are not too happy because they got caught. So if you take a look at it, you'll see it's more of a financial thing than an oil situation. But because you take, I believe, in a month or so, in other words, go a little bit out, it's at $25 and $28 a barrel. So it's largely a financial squeeze, and they did get squeezed. If we could buy it for nothing, we're going to take everything we can get. The only thing I like better than that is where they pay you to take the oil. But that's a short-term squeeze. You understand that. So I don't think you're going to see that. But no, we'd like to have Congress. This is a great time to buy oil. and we'd like to have Congress approve it so that we could, instead of just storing it for usually the big companies, because I think we have 75 million gallons right now capacity. That's a lot. We've been building it up over a period of time, but that's a lot, 75 million barrels. So we're going to either ask for permission to buy it.
When we get information in WHO, we get information in numbers. This many people died or this many people have been infected. We don't see the figures. We don't see the numbers. We see the individuals behind the numbers. You know where I come from. I know war. I know poverty. I know disease. I know how people suffer in war conditions. That's why I see people, I see faces. I see the mother or father of somebody. I see the daughters and sons of somebody. I'm telling you from a first-hand experience. I know how losing a brother means from childhood. That's why I'm being emotional. I know the tragedy that comes from disease, from pandemics, from war, from hate. You call it from poverty. And I resist to keep quiet. We need national unity. Strong national unity. Everybody fighting this virus, taking care of their citizens, taking care of real people. We need global solidarity that's cemented on genuine national unity. Without the two, without national unity and global solidarity, trust us, the worst is yet ahead of us.
In order to protect American workers, I will be issuing a temporary suspension of immigration into the United States. You heard about that last night. By pausing immigration, we'll help put unemployed Americans first in line for jobs as America reopens. So important. It would be wrong and unjust for Americans laid off by the virus to be replaced with new immigrant labor flown in from abroad. We must first take care of the American worker, take care of the American worker.
the virus and also having silenced the whistleblowers. It has also accused the leadership in China of negligence, resulting in enormous death and suffering all over the world. Now, this, in fact, is the first legal effort anywhere in the world that seeks accountability from China. Meanwhile, in China, a human trial is presently underway for a possible vaccine. We're being told that tens of volunteers are part of this trial and that the results so far are positive. Now, the vaccine targets the initial strain of the virus and a few early mutations, and herein, of course, lies the big challenge. Now, ever since the outbreak started in Wuhan, the novel coronavirus has mutated, according to reports, into as many as about 4,300 variations. In Wuhan, the administration is also distributing coupons to residents, and these coupons can be exchanged at restaurants and transport hubs and are aimed at encouraging spending and also at kick-starting the economy. While much of China is now returning to normal, one city in China's northeast has, of course, tightened travel curbs after a surge in COVID-19 cases. Now, Harbin is the capital of the Heilongjiang province that borders Russia, and it is now dealing with an influx of cases from its northern neighbors. Non-locals are banned from entering residential zones. There are similar rules for vehicles from other parts of China as well. All right, now to give us more insights in terms of how China, of course, is responding to this talk of cases being filed against China to hold China accountable for the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are joined in by Patrick Falk, who's joining us live from Beijing. Now, good afternoon to you, Patrick, and let me, of course, begin by asking you in terms of what has happened in the state of Missouri in the United States, where the state of Missouri has now decided to sue China for negligence and for resulting the COVID-19 pandemic in developing into a global pandemic. How are the Chinese responding to this?
Well, there's certainly no official response coming from the Chinese, and it does seem unlikely that there will be. This isn't the first lawsuit of its kind that's been made against the Chinese government, but it is, as far as we understand, the first by a U.S. state, essentially accusing China of covering up the coronavirus outbreak or the extent of the outbreak, particularly in the beginning months, and also not making it clear about the ability of the virus to transmit from humans to humans in the early months of the outbreak. As I say, though, not likely to get any response as such from the Chinese. As one commentator has already put it, if we can start going after governments about these sorts of things and the economic trouble that they have caused, then a lot of people are going to be putting their hands up and pointing the finger at the US over the 2008 global financial crisis. However, this is indicative of the environment that we're in, and there is a sort of growing backlash from Western governments in particular against China over what has happened. And in particular, there has been a development from Australia with the Prime Minister there saying that he had been in overnight calls with President Trump, as well as the leaders of France and Germany, calling for a probe into the origins of the virus. That still isn't something that is clear at this point, and China has hit back and accused Australia of parroting these claims that are being made by the US. We also had China's ambassador to the US hit out at President Trump for making the allegation that China had intentionally perhaps pushed this virus on the rest of the world. So it does seem as though the atmosphere between global leaders against China is stiffening, right. But as far as we understand, with the lawsuit that's being made against China, no response as of yet.
Absolutely. And also, there is this talk of, reparations that China may have to pay. This is something that is doing the rounds. There was a paper in Germany that spoke of reparations to the tune of almost about $160 billion. There are also talks that perhaps because China has lent out so much money to African nations, different African nations, and because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the economic activity has come virtually to a standstill, and therefore China must not try and ask these African nations to repay some of these loans. How is China looking at all of this talk?
concessions, if you like. There's no precedence for it as far as we understand, and China in many ways feels that it's trying to do what it can to support countries that are grappling with the crisis at this time.
And also one quick question just before I let you go, Patrick. There are reports of certain cases of infections where people had first completely recovered and then they again tested positive for COVID-19. How much of a concern is this within China? I think there seems to be a problem with the line there with my colleague Patrick Fox. So this of course, is the big story where the state of Missouri has now gone ahead and sued China for negligence and also for bringing about and causing the COVID-19 pandemic. How all of this...
The School of Medicine has halted the use of COVID-19 testing kits they acquired from China after they found that some of the testing kits were contaminated. Amid a shortage of sampling swabs and the liquid that preserves the samples for testing, the University of Washington School of Medicine bought these testing kits from China for $125,000. They did this through the help of a Seattle importer who had connections to a Chinese business associate with links to a doctor who could get testing kits from a Shanghai factory. The testing kits from Linian Precision Medical Products were then flown to the U.S. on an Amazon chartered plane. University of Washington Department of Laboratory Medicine Interim Chair Jeff Baird said he has recommended everyone who has these things pause and not use them at all. According to Baird, he realized something was wrong with the testing kits on April 16 when his colleague noticed some of the liquid changing in color. He then began going through the boxes of testing kits in the university's storage facility and found that, although most vials of liquid seemed fine, a few vials had liquid that looked orange or yellow and even cloudy instead of hot pink. The South China Morning Post explained that the change in color indicates bacterial growth. The contaminated vials of liquid were tested and found to have a bacteria called Stenotrophomonas maltophilia. According to the U.S. National Institutes of Health, this bacteria is normally found in fluids in the hospital setting and in patient secretions, affecting mainly people with weakened immune systems. Baird said they have determined the bacteria may not have affected the already analyzed coronavirus specimens, so patients need not be retested for the disease. However, the Chinese supplier will still issue a refund for the testing kits. The university will test the swabs packaged separately from the vials of liquid in case they too are contaminated. The UK has also fallen victim to faulty test kits from China, with the government reportedly seeking refunds for the millions of antibody tests they acquired from China in March. Newsweek reports that scientists are calling the antibody tests unreliable considering they have not performed well, causing a number of false negatives and false positives.
Thank you, Mr. President, and of course, thank you for the opportunity to brief the Security Council today on this very, very important issue. And forgive me for speaking bluntly, but I'd like to lay out for you very clearly what the world is facing at this very moment. At the same time, while we're dealing with COVID-19 pandemic, we're also on the brink of a hunger pandemic. In my conversations with world leaders over the past many months, before the coronavirus even became an issue, I was saying that 2020 would be facing the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II for a variety of reasons, such as the war in Syria, Yemen, the deepening crisis in places like South Sudan, and as John Eglin, I know, will no doubt set out about Burkina Faso in the central Sahel region, the desert locust swarms in Africa, as the Director General Chu highlighted in his remarks, and more frequent natural disasters and changing weather patterns that we're experiencing. The economic crisis in Lebanon, which is impacting millions of Syrian refugees, DRC, Sudan, Ethiopia, and the list goes on. We're already facing a perfect storm. So today with COVID-19, I want to stress that we're not only facing a global health pandemic, but also a global humanitarian catastrophe. Millions of civilians living in conflict-scarred nations, including many women and children, face being pushed to the brink of starvation, with the specter of famine a very real and dangerous possibility. This might sound truly shocking, but let me give you just some numbers. 821 million people go to bed hungry every night all over the world, chronically hungry. And as Dr. Chu just pointed out, as the new global report on food crisis that's published today shows, there are a further 135 million people facing crisis levels of hunger or worse. That means 135 million people on Earth are marching toward the brink of starvation. But now the World Food Program analysis shows also, due to the coronavirus, that an additional 130 million people could be pushed to the brink of starvation by the end of 2020. That's a total of 265 million people. On any given day now, WFP, we offer a lifeline to about 100 million people, up from about 80 million just a few years ago. This includes about 30 million people who literally depend on us to stay alive. If we can't reach these people with the life-saving assistance they need, our analysis shows that 300,000 people could starve to death every single day over a 3-month period. This does not even include the increase of starvation due to COVID. In a worst-case scenario, we could be looking at famine in about 36 countries. And in fact, 10 of these countries, we already have more than 1 million people per country who are on the verge of starvation. And in many places, this human suffering is a heavy price of conflict. At WFP, we are proud that the Council made the historic decision to pass Resolution 2417 in May 2018. It was amazing to see the Council come together. Now we have to live up to our pledge to protect the most vulnerable and act immediately to save lives around the world. But this is only, in my opinion, the first part of the strategy needed to protect conflict-riven countries from a hunger pandemic caused by the coronavirus. There's also a real danger that more people could potentially die from the economic impact of COVID-19 than from the virus itself. This is why I'm talking about a hunger pandemic. It is critical that we come together as one united global community to defeat this disease and protect the most vulnerable nations and communities from its potentially devastating effects. Lockdowns, economic recessions are expected to lead to a major loss of income among the working poor. Overseas remittances will also drop sharply. This will hurt countries like Haiti, Nepal, and Somalia, just to name a couple. The loss of tourism receipts will damage countries like Ethiopia, where it accounts for 47% of its total exports. The collapsing oil prices in lower income countries like South Sudan will have an impact significantly, where oil accounts for 98.8% of total exports. And of course, when donor countries' revenues are down, how much impact will this have on life-saving foreign aid? The economic and health impacts of COVID-19 are most worrisome for communities in countries across Africa as well as the Middle East, because the virus threatens further damage to the lives and the livelihoods of people already put at risk by conflict. WFP and our partners are going all out to help them. We'll do everything we possibly can. For example, we know that children are particularly vulnerable to hunger and malnutrition, so we are prioritizing assistance to them. Right now, as you may know, 1.6 billion children and young people are currently out of school around the world due to the lockdown. Nearly 370 million children of these children are missing out on nutritious school meals. You can only imagine when children don't get the nutrition, which means their immunity systems are down. But this is why we are providing nutritious school meals where we possibly can in these suspended areas to help, whether it's take-home rations to help the families and help these children. As you know, WFP is a logistic backbone for the humanitarian world, and even more so now for the global effort to beat this pandemic. We have delivered millions upon millions of personal protective equipment, testing kits, face masks to about 78 countries on behalf of the World Health Organization. We are also running humanitarian air services to get frontline health professionals, doctors, nurses, and humanitarian staff into countries that need help, especially while the passenger airline industry is basically about shut down. But we need to do more than this. And I urge the Council to lead the way. First and foremost, we need peace. As the Secretary General recently said very clearly, a global ceasefire is essential right now. Second, we need all parties involved in the conflicts to give us swift and unimpeded humanitarian access to all vulnerable communities so that we can get the assistance to them that they need, regardless of who they are or where they are. We also need, in a very general sense, humanitarian goods and commercial trade to continue flowing across the borders because they are the lifeline of global food systems as well as the global economy. Supply chains have to keep moving if we are going to overcome this pandemic and get food from where it is produced to where it is needed. It also means resisting the temptation to introduce like export bans or import subsidies, which can lead to price hikes and almost always backfire. WFP, we're already working hand in glove with governments to build and strengthen national safety nets. This is critical right now to ensure fair access to assistance and to help maintain peace and stability and prevent rising tensions among communities. Third, we need coordinated action to support life-saving humanitarian assistance. For example, WFP, we are implementing plans to pre-position 3 months worth of food and cash to serve country operations identified as priorities. We're asking donors to accelerate the $1.9 billion in funding that has already been pledged so that we can build stockpiles and create the life-saving buffers and protect the most vulnerable from the effects of supply chain disruptions, commodity shortages, economic damage, and lockdowns. You understand exactly what I'm talking about. We're also requesting a further $350 million to set up a network of logistics hubs and transportation systems to keep the humanitarian supply chains moving around the world. They will also provide field hospitals and medical evacuations to the frontline humanitarians and health workers as needed and strategically. Excellencies, 2 years ago, the Security Council took a landmark step when it recognized and condemned the devastating human toll that conflict paid in poverty and hunger. Resolution 2417, it also highlighted the need for early warning systems. And today, I'm here to raise that alarm. There are no famines yet, but I must warn you that if we don't prepare and act now to secure access, avoid funding shortfalls, and disruptions to trade, we could be facing multiple famines of biblical proportions within a short few months. The actions that we take will determine our success or failure in building sustainable food systems as the basis of stable and peaceful societies. The truth is, we do not have time on our side, so let's act wisely and let's act fast. I do believe that our expertise and our partnerships, we can bring together the teams and the programs necessary to make certain the COVID-19 pandemic does not become a human and food crisis catastrophe.
Tutte le contrarietà del tempo presente, abbandonando fitte tenebre si sono addensate sulle nostre piazze, strade e città. Si sono impadronite delle nostre vie, riempiendo tutto di un silenzio assordante e di un vuoto desolante, che paralizza ogni cosa al suo passaggio. Si sente nell'aria, si avverte nei gesti, lo dicono gli sguardi. Ci siamo trovati impauriti e smarriti. Ci siamo resi conto di trovarci sulla stessa barca, tutti fragili e disorientati, ma nello stesso tempo importanti e necessari. Tutti chiamati a remare insieme, tutti bisognosi di confortarci a vicenda. Su questa barca ci siamo tutti, tutti.
লাইক কমেন্ট শেয়ার করার অনুরোধ থাকলো। চ্যানেলটি সাবস্ক্রাইব করতে পারেন, বেল আইকনে ক্লিক করে পরবর্তী ভিডিওগুলোর নোটিফিকেশন পেয়ে যাবেন।